Well, you know what? I didn't really think it would be this soon where we spoke about Frederik Andersen again. Because if you've been following the channel, you would know we already made a Frederik Andersen video talking about the rumor that Nick Kyprios put out on his podcast on whether or not an Andersen for Murray 1-for-1 trade would go through. That was quite a riot of a topic, I will say. But give it a few days, and all of a sudden it's Elliotte Friedman who comes out with his latest 31 Thoughts article from 2 days ago, and who gives a little bit of an informational tidbit as to what's going on with Freddie, and one team that may actually be interested. Well, of course you can read. You probably clicked on this video because you read the title. So, let's go over onto thought number 19 of Elliotte Friedman's 31 Thoughts, where Friedge writes this. The Carolina Hurricanes have interest in Frederik Andersen, but Toronto's made it clear they have no desire to make a move just for the sake of change. If it happens, it's for an upgrade, which means the Maple Leafs could wait to see how a loaded group of goalie free agents shake out beforehand. So there you have it. It's a team that, according to sources, has been confirmed to express interest in Freddie. Now, first off, immediate reaction to this is not something that I think is all too surprising. The Carolina Hurricanes are a team that, even though they were supposed to be quite the powerhouse, in fact, I thought they were going to the Eastern Conference Finals in my own bracket, but they actually lost in the first round to the Boston Bruins. They're a team that straight up, if they get Frederik Andersen, becomes better. And that's mostly due to reputation, that's mostly due to workload, that's mostly due to capabilities. Because if you take a look at the Carolina Hurricanes and their goaltending tandem, they had James Reimer, whom, because James Reimer is the goalie in Carolina, I know a lot of Leaf fans are probably going to say, oh, we can get Reimer back, but like, hold your horses right there. James Reimer, Peter Mrazek, they had some games from Nedeljkovic, and they had Anton Forsberg as well, not to mention David Ayres. But the goaltending load was split in Carolina between Reimer and Mrazek. Mrazek had a .905 save percentage and a .269 goals against average. Reimer's goals against was similar, but his save percentage was much better at a .914. In the playoffs, though, they had an equal 5-3 split, and they both showed up really well in terms of the save percentage side. It's just in goals against average, James Reimer had a 2.36 as opposed to Peter Mrazek's 3.08. And while Mrazek and Reimer are both very good, capable goalies, to me, Frederik Andersen is just better, so it's understandable to see why Carolina would want Freddie. This is because over the years that Freddie has been in Toronto, sure, even though he has never won a series-clinching game in the playoffs with Toronto, he still has been one of the most busy, active, and consistently solid goalies in the league, because he kind of has to be. Toronto gives up shots in high quantities every single night, and it's been like that for years. So Freddie has always been one of the more overworked, overshot against goalies in the league, and he's been able to be solid on top of that. Plus the fact, for a little bit of trivia, that he was actually initially drafted by Carolina all the way back in 2010, before re-entering the draft in 2012, getting drafted by Anaheim, eventually getting traded to Toronto. Freddie Andersen, at 30 years of age, certainly is quite an interesting piece of Carolina Hurricanes trivia. That doesn't really play a part in why they would want him, it's just something funny that I would throw in there. But if Freddie Andersen is on the trade block, like James Myrtle's article on The Athletic earlier indicates, then honestly, in my mind, it kind of makes the most sense that the first team to be actually confirmed into wanting him by Elliotte Friedman is Carolina. Because earlier on in the Kasperi-Kapanen trade saga, it was confirmed by Pierre LeBrun that Carolina was actually asked whether or not they would want Kasperi-Kapanen. Pierre LeBrun said that Toronto was looking for a first-round pick back, and in particular with Carolina, the pick they wanted was their own first-round pick that was sent over in the Marleau buyout deal. Who knows if Don Waddell looked at this trade offer and said, hey, if you want to get your first back, why don't you give us Freddie Andersen too? Because you guys can use the cap space freed up from Freddie and sign another goalie in free agency, and we can take Freddie Andersen off your hands and use him next year in a playoff run. How about that? That's just my own personal speculation, because the two stories indeed are connecting the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Carolina Hurricanes. I'm just trying to make that connection there. But Even assuming that it's not, it certainly does make sense as to why the Leafs would want to trade Andersen. As we noted earlier, he has been on the trade block. With the fact that Freddie will be eligible for a contract extension this season, there's going to be a lot of uncertainty as to how the Leafs are going to manage with this player moving forward. Do the Leafs shell out the big bucks to keep Freddie in Toronto for 5, 6, or 7 years? Are they going to be capable of giving him the money that he can very well ask for? Or is it in their best interests to trade away Freddie, get some assets back, and just ride Jack Campbell for next year, and or sign another UFA goalie once this offseason commences? We know that Robin Lehner's available, we know that Jacob Markstrom might be available. There are going to be goalies on the market that you can go after that may indeed be cheaper than what a Freddie Andersen could probably ask for. And I get that on the Carolina side you could argue, well, why doesn't Carolina just go after Lehner too? Well, if the Hurricanes' goal is to win in the short term, which they very well could have set out to do with all the trade deadline assets they made, with Trocheck, with Vatanen, and with Brady Shea too, this team wanted to win in the short term. And if they go after Frederik Andersen, what they get is a short-term stint of a $5 million goalie who could probably steal you a game or two. Freddie was straight up better in the postseason than Reimer and Mrazek were. He had a .936 save percentage and a .184 goals against average. You don't really see goalies with a .184 lose out on their series unless you're going up against Joonas Korpisalo. That's not even to say that goaltending is the entire reason that the Carolina Hurricanes lost to Boston in the first place. Sure, you could say that getting a few more saves here and there could have helped, but at the same time, there's a lot more that you want to go through if you want to beat out Boston. And honestly, I kind of mentioned this in a few videos before, but I do believe that if Carolina played any other team than Boston in the first round, I think they probably would have made it to the second round, just saying. Boston kind of has this weird play style that completely counteracts the Carolina Hurricanes and what they were able to do in the playoffs, but that's off topic. Going back to the original idea though, Carolina getting Freddie Andersen, one big thing we were missing out on is the return. The big thing that Toronto wanted initially from the Kapanen negotiations was a first-round pick, in particular their first-round pick. And if they still want that, then I'm not too sure if a Frederik Andersen on his own would be enough to get it. I know Freddie's a good goalie, but the contract situation is a big deal. 1 year of Frederik Andersen is significantly less valuable than 3 or 4 or 5 years of Frederik Andersen. You could maybe add a clause saying, okay, it'll be Andersen for a second and a third, but if Andersen resigns, that third becomes a first. But who knows if the NHL will even allow trades like that to go on anymore in the future, where, okay, the draft pick will get upgraded if player X resigns a contract extension. I don't know if the NHL is going to be super lenient towards those kinds of deals in the future. But that's certainly something that I think could really balance out the scales if you wanted to make it Andersen for 13th overall. Who knows though, because the Toronto Maple Leafs are indeed open to trading away a whole bunch of other guys. We noted this in the previous video. Kerfoot, Engvall, Janssen, they're all on the trade block as well. It's not just Freddie. So if the Carolina Hurricanes want to get any of those guys and free up more of Toronto's salary for the short-term future, then we'll see what happens. If it comes to that point, then honestly, I think the 13th overall pick can be seen as an equal compensation for a package of a whole bunch of Toronto assets. But of course, this is only one team out of the many NHL teams that may be inclined to trading for a Frederik Andersen because they want some short-term success and they would rather have an upgrade in net only for 1 year instead of going after a Robin Lehner or something and signing them to a long-term contract. And who knows, Friedman's point at the very end makes a lot of sense, how the Leafs could wait and see how the goaltending free agent group shakes out. Because if any of these other free agent goalies are available, you can trade a Freddie Andersen and get in another really good guy to replace him. That could be seen as an upgrade depending on what you get back for Andersen in a trade. What do you think seems more valuable? 1 year of Frederik Andersen or a whole bunch of assets that you get back for Freddie and a goalie that you sign long-term to a contract in free agency that may be a little bit cheaper than what Frederik Andersen could have gotten, or maybe even a little bit more expensive. At the end of the day, you still get more assets. And if you're able to free up more cap space by also trading a Janssen or something, then you know, there's a little bit of a 4D chess thing going on over there. I kind of respect the grind. So, talk to me in the comments what you think about this whole idea. Frederik Andersen to the Carolina Hurricanes. Would you do it? Would you make a trade? And if so, what would you include in that trade? I hope you enjoyed this video. That Troll99, and bye.